I used to think some people just changed, that it was a normal part of growing up. People drift, get bitter, harden. That was how I explained what happened to her for a long time. I told myself she just became someone else, that it wasn't personal. It took me years to admit it wasn't normal at all. Her name was Ava. We were best friends growing up. Same street, same school, same everything. There wasn't a single sleepover or birthday party where she wasn't there. For years, we were like our own little orbit. She was smart and weird in a good way. The kind of kid who made up stories during lunch and drew creepy comics in the margins of her notebooks. I liked that about her. She made boring things feel alive. Then she disappeared. It was the summer after graduation. No big send-off, no party. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Her aunt posted some photo on Facebook of Ava in Italy or Greece, some old town with narrow stone streets. I hadn't even known she was leaving. I messaged her more than once. No replies. Eventually, I stopped. Not because I was mad, but because I didn't want to feel like I was bothering her. I figured maybe she needed space or just wanted a fresh start. She came back 2 years later. It wasn't announced. There was no big reunion. I just ran into her at a petrol station of all places. I remember how weirdly bright it was inside, the way bad fluorescent lighting always is. I saw her before she saw me. And even though her face hadn't changed much, I felt something tighten in my chest. Her eyes weren't the same. It wasn't anything like you see in some movies, where they can literally see darkness or whatever. But the way she looked at me, it was like I was an inconvenience, like she'd already moved on and was annoyed I hadn't. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, just gave me a flat hey and grabbed her receipt. I stood there like an idiot holding a Fanta. I didn't even say much, just something like, "Your bag." And she nodded and walked out. That was it. I tried to reach out again, occasionally texting her. I got nothing back. I ran into her once more at a grocery store. Same deal, cold, flat, not mean, just completely uninterested. After a while, I gave up. And I told myself maybe that was fine. Maybe people don't always owe you an explanation for who they become. But part of me kept replaying that first moment in the gas station, the way she looked through me. That brings me to last year. It was a Saturday night, early fall. I was home alone, half watching a YouTube documentary with the volume low. My phone was face down. I remember the exact buzz it made, that long one, the kind you get with messages from people not in your contacts. I don't know why I even checked it. It was from Ava, or at least from her number. There wasn't a message, just a link, no context, no greeting, just a string of random characters and a .onion address buried in the middle. I stared at it for probably a full minute. I didn't even breathe. My first thought was that it was a scam or malware. But some part of me, the old part that still remembered how close we were, told me she sent it on purpose, that there was a reason. I used an old laptop, booted it into Tails. I'd played with Tor before years ago, but never for anything like this. My hands were clammy the whole time. I told myself if anything looked shady, I'd kill the power immediately. The page took almost a full minute to load. When it finally did, it was just a black screen with a timer. 0248, just under 3 minutes. It counted down in red, and underneath it was a chat box already going. Lines of text, constant, some of it in languages I couldn't read. The rest was English, but coded, like slang or shorthand. I couldn't tell what they were talking about at first, When the timer hit 0, the stream flickered on. There was a chair in the middle of a concrete room. It was bolted to the floor, but empty. The room was completely empty, as far as I could see, with no windows. Just the hum of overhead lights and the faint echo of someone walking, somewhere off camera. I still didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the chat changed. People were typing numbers, making bids. Usernames I didn't recognize were posting names. Some were fake, some felt too real. One of them was next pick, pulled from chat. That's when I felt my stomach turn. I scrolled up to try and make sense of it, and that's when I saw her, Avenue, or what had to be her. Not her real name, but an old handle she used in middle school. I hadn't seen it in years. No one else could have remembered that. She was active, posting, typing like she belonged there. Then I saw it. Bid. £9,400. Then my name. M. Full name. Spelled correctly, properly capitalized, just sitting there like any other text. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. Couldn't even close the tab. I just sat there watching more usernames chime in. Seconded. Confirmed. Show us the face. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged it. Yanked the battery like that would somehow protect me. My ears were ringing. It was like that high-pitched tone you get when your body goes into survival mode. I don't remember standing up. I just remember pacing, hands shaking, heart doing this sick little flutter in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't know. 1 voicemail. It was 10 seconds of silence, then the sound of something scraping across concrete. That same sound from the stream. I threw the phone out, got a new number. Emails came next, one-liners. Things like, "We'll find you," or "Don't bother running." They were always from different addresses, always with some little detail to let me know it was personal. I deleted everything and removed all of my private info off social media. I did my best to erase any trace of myself online. But the more I scrubbed, the more I realized how much of me was still floating out there. Then came the people. At first, I convinced myself it was just paranoia. I would walk to the store and feel the weight of someone behind me. I would glance out the window and see a car idling across the street, longer than made sense for someone doing nothing. But the patterns kept repeating. It was the same car, the same face. Not every day, but often enough to notice. Different angles, different times, always nearby. Always lingering just long enough to register, but never long enough to confront. Eventually, I filed a police report. It was a waste of time. There were no direct threats, no evidence. They told me to block the emails and vary my daily routines. I had already done that. So I left. I moved to a different city. I changed my name. I found a place to rent off the books and stayed disconnected. I deleted every trace of myself online, and I stopped using any account tied to my real identity. For a while, I believed I was safe. That changed last week. Someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me walking home taken from behind. The framing was deliberate. The image was clear. It was taken recently, close and carefully. There was no note, no sender, no explanation, only the photograph. Now I am packing again. Because wherever Ava is, whatever she has become, she saw me. And this time, she chose me. I wasn't looking for anything specific that night. I couldn't sleep, and I'd already burned through the usual distractions: Netflix, Reddit, old messages I shouldn't have reread. That kind of night. You're not tired, just restless. Everything's quiet, but your head won't shut up. I ended up back on the dark web. I'd messed around with it before, mostly out of curiosity. Never bought anything, never went deep. But that night, I felt pulled toward it, like I was itching for something I couldn't name. They always say you should stop scrolling when your hands start to shake, or when you feel the temperature change in the room, or when the silence becomes too loud. It's one of those internet urban legends people share to scare each other off the deep end of the web. I used to think that was all drama, just horror fanfare for people who wanted to feel edgy. Now I think those warnings exist for a reason. It started with insomnia, that kind of mindless, late-night restlessness where nothing feels real and the smallest click can lead to hours vanishing. I was going through a rough patch, jobless, between apartments, staying in my older brother's spare room and trying to keep out of the way. My days had no structure, and my nights were filled with screen glow and silence. I had gone through every surface web rabbit hole I could find: creepy forums, niche subreddits, amateur surveillance camera archives. At some point, I started getting bored with the usual stuff. It didn't hit the same. I wasn't looking for horror exactly. I just wanted to feel something. Anything. That's when I remembered the dark web. I'd heard all the stories: fake red rooms, black market hoaxes, the usual dramatic stuff. But I also knew the tech. I knew how to navigate it safely. Or at least, I thought I did. I spun up Tails OS on an old laptop, routed through Tor, and kept my identity clean. For a while, it was just curiosity. Old message boards, empty markets, strange listings with broken links. It was like walking through an abandoned shopping mall, but with the lingering smell of something rotting just out of sight. But one thread kept coming back. It was buried inside a defunct forum with barely any traffic, mostly dead links and gibberish posts. But one thread, titled simply "Windowless," had recent activity. A few users kept responding to each other in single words, like coded check-ins. I didn't understand what they were saying, but something about how quiet the rest of the forum was made that thread feel alive, like it was pulsing just under the surface. I watched it for days before someone posted something new. They dropped a link, no fanfare, just a bare hyperlink with a timestamp and the words "real feed." It led to a login screen. I didn't have credentials, obviously, but I took a screenshot out of habit. A few minutes later, a second post appeared with a new link. This one had a different domain. I clicked it without really thinking. It brought me to a countdown. 1 minute 44 seconds. There was no text, no branding, just the timer and a black video window below it. I stared at it, trying to guess what it might be. The chat was open, but it was locked. I couldn't post, only watch. The numbers ticked down. I almost closed the tab, but something made me wait. Maybe it was the way the screen made everything around me feel darker, or maybe I was just curious in a way I didn't want to admit. The hum of the air conditioning sounded distant, like I was sinking below something. When the timer hit 0, the feed activated. The screen lit up with a dim, grainy video of a room. Small, concrete, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, a chain on the back wall. Nothing else. At first it was empty. I thought maybe it was a hoax, another ARG, something theatrical. But then a figure stepped into frame. Not the person I expected. It was a man in dark clothes, face obscured. He looked into the camera briefly, then left the frame. A few seconds later, he returned dragging someone. The person's face was hidden, but they were conscious, struggling weakly, hands tied. They were shoved into the chair and strapped in. The chat exploded. Lines of text flew by. Most of it was incomprehensible. Users bidding, commenting, laughing. Some posted emojis. Others just spammed numbers. There was a list forming on the right. Usernames next to dollar amounts. And at the top of the list was a name I recognized. Mine. It didn't make sense. I hadn't logged in. I hadn't made an account. But there it was. My username from an old game account I hadn't used in years, spelled exactly the same. And next to it, a bid, £8,300. I felt something drop in my chest. My hands were sweating. I reached for the mouse, but it lagged. The screen flickered. The video kept going. The person in the chair looked up. Even with the resolution as bad as it was, I could see the fear in their face. They were crying, muffled. Their eyes scanned the room like they were looking for a way out, and for some awful reason, I felt like they could see me, like I wasn't just watching, like I was part of it. The camera zoomed in slightly. More bids came in, more usernames I didn't recognize, but mine stayed near the top. Then the figure came back, holding something, a blunt object. The way he moved was calm, mechanical, and just before the feed cut out, he looked directly at the camera. The screen went black. The chat froze. Then the browser closed itself. I sat there staring at my desktop, heart racing. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't clicked anything except the link. How did it know my name? That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, or what little I could see of it, staring through the screen. Not like he was performing, like he was watching me. The next day, I got an email. No subject line. Just an image. A photo of my house, taken from the street. It wasn't recent. It had to be at least a year old, before I moved. But it was mine. You could see my old car in the driveway, the busted mailbox I never fixed. More messages came after that, each one from a different address. Most just contained links. I didn't click them. One had a video attachment. I deleted it without opening it. Even hovering over it made my skin crawl. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 10 seconds of silence, followed by the sound of something metal scraping across concrete. I left the house that night. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove. Slept in a motel an hour away. Threw the laptop in a dumpster behind a gas station. Bought a new phone the next morning. But it didn't matter, because the next morning, there was a piece of paper tucked under the motel door. Just one sentence. Your bid was accepted. I don't know how they found me. Maybe they never lost me. I moved across the country after that. Changed my name. Got a job under the table. No credit cards. No internet in my name. I even stopped using public Wi-Fi. I did everything you're supposed to do when you want to disappear. And for a while, I thought I'd done it. It worked. For almost a year. Until last week. I found a box outside my door. No postage, no return address. Just sitting there like someone had placed it and walked away. Inside was a single item. A webcam. Old, dusty, with a cracked lens. The kind you'd plug into a desktop tower back in 2005. I hadn't seen one like it in years. Underneath it, there was a folded note. Smile for the feed. I haven't turned on a screen since, and I don't think I ever will again. thought it was some twisted prank at first, until I saw the bruises on his face and the way he looked directly at the camera. Not past it, at me. I didn't even want to click the link, but he pushed for it. He said, "What's the worst that could happen?" I should have pushed back harder, said no, or just left. But I didn't. And now I see his face every time I close my eyes. I'd never really clicked with anyone like him before. Callum had this dry, brutal sense of humor, the kind where you're not sure if he's joking or just being a dick until he smirks. We met through this niche Discord server for analog horror fans, ended up on the same voice chat one night, stayed up till 3 a.m. talking about everything from cursed YouTube videos to those weird VHS RGs no one finishes. It turned out we lived one town apart, about 20 minutes by train. After that, it wasn't just online anymore. We'd hang out, get takeaway, crash at each other's places. He always had something playing on his second monitor, usually unsettling internet rabbit holes or weird live streams from countries neither of us could pronounce. I quite liked the chaos, to be honest. He made everything feel more intense, more alive. But that edge, I didn't realize how real it would get. The last time I saw him was a Thursday. We were meant to meet up Saturday. He was supposed to help me move some furniture, but he ghosted. At first, I assumed hangover, or maybe he'd just forgotten. But then Sunday passed, then Monday. I went by his flat after work. Lights were off, curtains drawn, door locked. But outside there were 4 Uber Eats bags, one of them half split open, ice cream melted through the bottom. I reported him missing Tuesday morning. The woman at the desk in the police station barely looked up, scribbled his name down, nodded like it was routine, like he was routine, said they'd log it and send someone round if anything came up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about one of those bags of food, how the receipt had the wrong name. J something, not Callum, not even close. I went back to his flat the next day and just sat there across the street, watching. Then, late that evening, I got a message from his account. Just a single link. No words, no emojis, no subject. The URL was long and messy, no preview. But I recognized one thing, the string.onion buried inside it. I told myself maybe it was him messing with me, a prank, something he'd find hilarious later. I copied it, but I didn't open it, not yet. I finally caved that Friday. I booted up Tor, pasted the link in, and just sat there watching it buffer. The site was crude. It had a black background, one embedded player, no controls, just a timer in the corner and a blank title bar. Then it loaded. It was him, Callum, sitting in a dark room, shirtless, pale, face swollen, lips split, and then he looked straight at the camera, not like he was looking at a lens, like he was looking through it, at me. I wasn't sure if it was a recording or not, so I screen recorded what I could. My hands were shaking so bad the mouse kept jittering. Soon after, I went back to the police. I thought it would be different this time. It wasn't. They asked why I had the footage, why I hadn't come in sooner. They even asked what my relationship with him was. And when I said we were friends, they paused. One of them asked, real quiet, "Just friends?" I walked out, deleted the screen capture from my phone on the way home. I was scared they'd take it, or worse, say I did something to him. I started staying at my parents'. They live outside town. No one knew I was there. I didn't post anything about it. I didn't tell anyone, and my phone stayed off most nights. But then, on Saturday morning, Someone rang the bell. My mum called me to the door. Did you order something? I went downstairs to find her holding a parcel. No label, no address, just my name. Inside the parcel was a USB stick, nothing else. I didn't plug it into anything right away. I waited until later that day, until everyone had gone to bed. When it felt safe, I plugged it into my old laptop. It felt smarter. It has no Wi-Fi. After it had eventually loaded, the only file on it was a video. There was no title, just a date. The same day I got the message. I hesitated, but then I pressed play. It opened. It was me, sitting at my desk, staring at my monitor, typing. I didn't even remember that moment, but it was definitely me. I had the same clothes I usually wore at home, and the angle, someone had been in the flat across from mine, filming me, watching me. Then the camera cut, and I saw him again. Callum. He was on his knees, shaking. Behind him, there was a plastic sheet, a roll of duct tape, and something metallic, glinting. He tried to speak. His lips moved, but there was no sound. Then I saw it. A hand, just the edge of one, came into frame. And everything after that I should have looked away. I should have closed it, but I didn't. I couldn't. The moment he stopped breathing, the stream cut out. Back to black. They never found him. The police closed the case 2 weeks later. They declared it an unsubstantiated report, whatever that means. I wiped my old drives, burned the USB and switched phones. I'm not sure how much good it'll do. You don't have to listen to me. I realize I'm just a stranger to you, but if you ever get sent a Red Room link, even as a joke, don't click it. Just don't. I still get that moment. Sometimes when I'm halfway through a normal day or scrolling through something stupid like memes, and I'll feel it all over again. That pause, that breath I forgot to take when I realized who I was looking at on that screen. It was my brother. Let me back up. This happened about 5 years ago. I was 22, working part-time and drifting a bit. I spent way too much time online, if I'm being honest, especially late at night when the house was dead quiet and I couldn't sleep. There's something weird about that hour between midnight and 4 a.m., where your brain convinces you that clicking on anything is fine, like you're not accountable at that time. That's how I ended up on the dark web. I wasn't into anything sketchy. I wasn't trying to buy anything illegal or hire a hitman or whatever people think happens there. For me, it was just about curiosity, exploration. I liked peeling back layers of the internet, seeing what existed underneath the surface. I followed all the usual safety advice, VPNs, Tails OS, burner laptops. It wasn't about being edgy. I genuinely just liked the sense that I was in a space where the rules didn't fully apply. At first, it was the usual. Forums, strange market pages, broken storefronts that had obviously been dead for years. Occasionally, I'd come across these obscure blogs, like digital journals of people who clearly weren't right. Some of them were rambling messes. Others were scarily lucid. Those were the worst. One night, I found a link in the comments of a dead thread. It was just a string of text, no preview, no context. But the message above it just said, "For those who want to see what they paid for." It led to a blank page with a single embedded player. No chat box, no menu, just the word "live" in red text above the video window. The loading bar took a while to move, and I remember that because I nearly clicked away out of boredom. But then the stream started. It was dark at first, bad lighting. I could barely make anything out. Just a person, slumped forward, hands bound, shirtless, face obscured by their hair and the grainy quality of the feed. And I remember thinking, this has to be fake. Like, who's going to live stream a crime? That's ridiculous. It has to be performance art or a prank site. I kept looking for the watermark or the subscription prompt. Something to tell me it was just theatre. But then he looked up. Just for a second. That's when my stomach dropped. Because even though the quality was awful, I knew that face. It was Jamie, my brother. I hadn't seen him in months. He'd taken a gap year to go travelling after college. Southeast Asia mostly. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Cambodia. He'd post on Instagram now and then, but nothing recent. I didn't think much of it. I figured Wi-Fi was spotty, that he was just being present or whatever. But there he was, on my screen, bruised, silent, and alive. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there with my hand on the mouse, breathing like I'd just sprinted somewhere. The stream didn't show anything violent, not at first. It was just him, alone in that room. And the longer I watched, the more certain I became that this wasn't staged. The lighting wasn't cinematic. The set wasn't designed. It was just real. I remember I started whispering to myself, like saying things out loud would make it stop. I kept repeating his name under my breath, like he might somehow hear it through the screen. Then a figure entered the frame. No face, just boots and gloves. They walked into shot slowly, and Jamie flinched. He didn't scream or cry. He just recoiled, like someone who'd already been through this more than once. That's when I snapped out of it. I yanked the Ethernet cable, shut the laptop, nearly dropped it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost couldn't unlock my phone. I called my parents first. It was 3 a.m, but they picked up on the first ring. I couldn't explain anything clearly. I think I just kept saying, I saw him, over and over. They contacted the embassy, filed reports, reached out to his travel contacts. Everything went into overdrive. And the weirdest part? They found him. Not the same day, but close. He was discovered in a warehouse near the edge of Phnom Penh, drugged, dehydrated, but alive. He had no idea how long he'd been there. The last thing he remembered was getting into a tuk-tuk after a night out. Everything after that was a blur, just flashes of light, muffled voices, and cold concrete. He didn't know about the stream. He still doesn't, actually. I never told him. I told everyone else I found a tip online, that someone had posted about a man matching his description being held in a warehouse. It wasn't even a lie, really. Just not the whole truth. After he came home, things went back to normal, on the surface. He doesn't talk about it, and we all pretend that's fine. But sometimes I catch him staring off when he thinks no one's watching. Like he's still there, stuck in that room, waiting for something to happen again. And I get it, because I still see him too. Not the version we have now, but the one on that screen. Silent, tied, waiting. That was the last time I ever touched the dark web. I wiped everything, scrubbed the drives, burned the laptop, if you can believe that. Literally threw it in a fire pit. I don't know who ran that site, or how they found him, or how I ended up there at the exact right time. Maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe someone wanted me to see it. Either way, I got out. He got out. But I still don't let myself think about how many other people clicked that same link and didn't recognize the face. used to think my dad was just a workaholic. You know, one of those guys who can't sit still. The kind that's always got a bag packed near the door. Always talking about flights and meetings and early starts in places you've only ever seen in airport codes. That's how he was growing up. Gone a lot. I got used to the rhythm of it. 3 or 4 days away back on Sunday. Gone again by Wednesday. He'd bring home duty-free Toblerones and weird coins from countries I couldn't pronounce. I never really asked questions. It just became normal. But the last time he left, he never came back. He told us it was a longer trip, said he had to go to Turkey for something, then maybe Dubai. I didn't think much of it at the time. He'd done that route before. I figured he'd be home in 2 weeks, maybe 3. A month passed, then 6 weeks. My mum stopped talking about it by the 8th. She just kind of shut down. Whenever I brought it up, she'd say he was fine. That work was just complicated. But her voice sounded more and more like someone trying to convince themselves. I don't really know why I ended up on the dark web again. I'd poked around when I was younger, just out of boredom. Never bought anything or got deep into it. But that night, something pulled me back in. Maybe I was just restless. Or maybe I was looking for answers in places that didn't make sense. It started like it always does. Tor browser, forums, threads that feel dead until you see the view count and realize thousands of people are reading, just not talking. I went further than I'd gone before, clicked through a string of buried links that led to a directory full of pages with single-word names. One of them said Showcase. That's where I found it. It wasn't called a red room, not directly. But the moment the page loaded, I knew what it was. A live stream, minimal interface. One embedded video window with live in the corner. No playback controls. Just a view account that flickered between 13 and 15 like it was trying to catch up. The camera was pointed at a man sitting in a chair. His face was swollen, lips split, dried blood down the side of his neck. He was tied at the wrists and ankles, breathing through his mouth like every inhale hurt. I couldn't tell if he was conscious. His head lolled forward, chin against his chest. Something about him felt familiar. That's what got me. At first I couldn't place it, but the way he sat, the posture, the slope of his shoulders, the thinning grey hair. I thought it was my dad. Everything in me went cold. I leaned forward, watching the pixels shift with every frame, trying to tell if it was really him. The lighting was low, red-tinged, and the camera had this slight fisheye distortion, but it looked like him. Then someone else stepped into the frame. A man, taller, dressed in dark clothing, face covered in shadows. He had gloves on and something long in one hand. I thought it was a bat at first. Then I saw the blade catch the light. I couldn't move. I just sat there, watching, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I don't even remember reaching for the keyboard, but I must have, because I typed something in the chat box below the stream. Just one word. Dad? That's when everything shifted. The man in the background turned, slowly, like he'd heard a noise from behind the camera, and looked straight into the lens. The angle wasn't great. His face was half obscured, but I saw enough, the shape of his jaw, the small scar above his eyebrow, the way his right hand twitched, just a little, when he was thinking. It wasn't the man in the chair who was my dad. It was the one holding the knife. My fingers hovered above the keys. I didn't know what to type. My whole body locked up. And then, without hesitation, he stepped forward, raised the blade, and ended it. Just like that. No pause, no words. The man in the chair jerked once, then nothing. The stream cut to black. The site crashed immediately after. When I tried to reload it, I got a 404 error. Every link I'd used to get there led nowhere. It was like the whole thing had been scrubbed in real time. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my desk, lights off, trying to tell myself I'd made a mistake, that it wasn't him, that my brain had filled in the gaps with what it wanted to believe. But the scar above the eye, the twitch in the hand, you don't imagine that. I never saw him again. No calls, no emails, no body. He was just gone. I never told my mum. I didn't see the point. What could I say? That I saw him in a murder live stream, that he wasn't the victim. I've gone over that moment again and again, trying to make sense of it. Why he did it, who he was working with, if it had been going on for years, if every business trip had been a cover for something darker. I wish I'd never clicked anything that night. I wish I didn't look. But most of all, I wish I hadn't typed that word. Because I think he saw it. I think he recognized it. And I think that's why he did what he did. I think it was because of me. It started small. I was on the bus one morning, half asleep, when this guy started yelling at a woman who brushed past him. He wouldn't shut up, just kept escalating, like he wanted her to hit him. No one said anything, neither did I. But I remember thinking, what if someone just broke his jaw right there? It wasn't anger. It wasn't about standing up for her. It was the image that got me. His mouth hanging open, blood dripping from his chin, silence. It felt satisfying. That scared me a little, but not enough. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Just one of those intrusive thoughts everyone gets. But mine didn't fade. They grew roots. Every day it was someone else. A guy laughing too loud, a kid kicking the back of my seat. And it wasn't just the thoughts. I started wanting to see it. Not in real life, just somewhere. So I looked. It started with fight videos, then security cam footage, then clips from places you're not supposed to find. The fake stuff didn't do it. I wanted to see real harm, what skin looks like when it breaks, the way people twitch when pain catches them off guard, the blank look right after, that silence. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to do anything. I just wanted to see, to understand it, but I wasn't watching anymore. I was studying. I found forums, private ones. They didn't just share content, they shared instructions. How to hide servers, how to mask streams, how to set up private rooms. It wasn't called a red room, not directly, but that's what it was. And I read every word, more than once. Eventually, I started building. Just the back end, just the skeleton, no audience, no camera. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I wouldn't go further. But I kept checking it, refreshing the page, just to see that it worked, just to see the waiting for feed text light up. Then one night, I got a message. No intro, just a video. A man, tied to a chair, crying, 10 seconds long. Under it, "You built the room. Want to try it out?" I shut the laptop, hard. My heart was racing, not from fear, from that same cold pulse I'd felt on the bus. Like something just clicked into place. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Next night, a new link. Live feed, black screen, one button. Start. I stared at it for a long time. I wanted to look away. I didn't. I never clicked it. But I sat there with my finger hovering over the mouse for I don't even know how long. That was months ago. I wiped everything after that, burned my notes, destroyed the hard drive, told myself it was done. But a few days later, A USB showed up in my mailbox. No label, just a clear plastic bag. I didn't open it. It's still in my drawer. And some nights, not often, just when I'm not sleeping, I wonder if it's still live, if someone's still waiting. I tell myself I'm not that kind of person, that I haven't done anything. But then I think about how close I got, how easy it felt, and I don't know where that line is anymore. He didn't say anything. He just tilted his head, really slowly, like he was trying to figure something out about me. Not if he was going to do something, but whether it'd be worth the effort. The link wasn't hidden. I don't know why that's the part that sticks with me, but it does. It wasn't masked behind some shady redirect or buried deep in a thread. It was just there, centered on the page in plain text. Apply for jobs. High payout, no questions. And I clicked it. No second thought, no suspicion, just bored curiosity and too much time on my hands. Back then, I was working nights at a loading dock, graveyard shift, Tuesday through Saturday. It wasn't a hard job, but it was long and mindless. Mostly just scanning pallets, logging codes, occasionally clearing stuff out when shipments got backed up. The kind of work where your brain starts to drift a lot, especially after midnight. My breaks were the same every night. 10 minutes in this little plastic booth with flickering overhead lights and a vending machine that only took change. I'd lean back in the chair, crack open a can of Red Bull that tasted like copper, and scroll through my usual trash rabbit holes. Forums, conspiracy boards, that sort of thing. It sounds sketchy, but it's just what helped the time pass. There was one site in particular I kept checking. I won't say the name. Honestly, I think it's gone now anyway. But it was this mix of internet horror stories and supposed sightings of weird things online. Creepy videos, strange live streams, hidden pages on obscure browsers. A lot of it was clearly made up, but every now and then someone would post something that didn't feel like a joke. That's where I saw the link. It was just sitting there in a thread that had nothing to do with jobs or money or anything even remotely related. Someone had replied to an old post with that single sentence: apply for jobs, high payout, no questions. And the link right underneath it. No context, no replies. I don't even remember hesitating. I wish I did. I wish I could say I felt something off, or that I paused, or that I even thought about it at all, but I didn't. I was just curious, bored. So I tapped it. The page that opened was, honestly, underwhelming. No graphics, no design. Just a list of jobs in plain white text against a black background. Stuff like overnight courier needed, or remote surveillance, high risk, 3 nights only. And then a few more, vague ones. One of them said wet work, international, name already chosen. I didn't know what that meant at first, but I remember staring at it because it was the only one that didn't have a click to apply button. It just sat there, like it had already been filled. The weird thing was, there wasn't much else on the site. No about page, no links to other forums, just a handful of jobs and a single message box at the bottom right corner, like one of those live chat things customer support uses. I don't even know how long I was staring at it when a message popped up. I didn't type anything. I hadn't even touched the keyboard. It just appeared. One sentence. I don't want to say what it said exactly, but it was direct, personal. Like whoever it was thought I was logging in to do something, not just look around. I closed everything immediately, like browser, tabs, apps, all of it. I even shut the whole phone off, which I never do. My hands were a bit shaky. My mouth was dry. I remember feeling suddenly very aware of how quiet it was in that booth, like I'd just been pulled out of something without realizing how deep in I was. The rest of the night passed in a kind of haze. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, probably a bot or someone screwing around. But when my shift ended and I walked to my car, I saw something that snapped me out of it fast. There was a napkin tucked under my windshield wiper. Not a receipt or a flyer, just a neatly folded napkin. White, unbranded. Inside, written in what looked like permanent marker, was one word. One word I'm not going to repeat. I just sat there in the driver's seat for a while, engine off, staring at the dash. I kept thinking, maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone thought my car was someone else's. But that doesn't even make sense when I say it out loud. It was too specific. I didn't go home right away. I parked behind a pharmacy a few blocks away and just sat there for a while. My phone was still off. I didn't want to turn it back on. I was scared it'd buzz again. For the next couple of days, things were off. It's hard to describe. It's not like someone was obviously following me or anything. It was more like something had shifted. My mailbox kept getting flyers with the wrong name. Junk mail addressed to someone I'd never heard of. Same building, same unit number, just a different name. And I kept seeing this SUV parked across the street when I'd get home. Different times, but always the same vehicle, same shape, same blacked out windows. I told myself I was imagining it until one night I walked past it and noticed the engine was still warm. Then the emails started. At first, I thought it was spam, but they weren't spam. They were blank, just subject lines. They said things like, "You're not moving fast enough," or "He's watching," or "Answer the door." I ignored all of them until the last one. That one said to answer the door. The email hit my inbox around 2:43 a.m. I remember the time because it was the exact moment someone knocked. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. I just stood in the hallway, staring at the door, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. When I finally looked through the peephole, there was no one there. I thought maybe it was just a prank, but when I checked the footage from the security camera outside my door, there was nothing. Just a black gap in the footage between 2:42 and 2:45. Everything else that day had recorded just fine. That's when I went to the police. And, yeah, what a waste of time. The guy behind the desk looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. When I explained, he asked me if I spend a lot of time on conspiracy sites. He smiled when he said it. That smug little smile people give when they've already decided you're a lunatic. So I left. I went home, deleted everything off my phone, wiped my laptop, changed my passwords. I didn't sleep. I kept the lights off, curtains closed. I sat on the floor in the hallway for hours, just listening. Around 3 a.m., I looked out the window. There was a man across the street, just standing there, not moving, not smoking or pacing or looking at his phone, just facing my building. He stood like that for maybe a minute. I blinked, and he was gone. That was it for me. I grabbed a bag, packed what I could, and decided to leave town. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to go. I took the stairs because the elevator was slow and loud and felt like a trap. But when I hit the second floor landing, I stopped. There was someone sitting there, cross-legged, still, facing the wall. At first, I didn't even realize he was a person. He didn't react when I came down the stairs. He didn't move at all. Then slowly, he stood up. He didn't say anything threatening. He didn't have a weapon. He just looked at me, calm and bored almost. like this whole thing had dragged on too long. And then he said something that made my skin go cold. He thought I was the target, that I was the job. I don't remember how I got outside. I don't remember running. I just remember that sick feeling in my gut, like my stomach was being crushed from the inside. I didn't go back. I didn't even stop to get gas. I drove until my phone died, and I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Then I crashed at a friend's place 2 towns over. I gave her some half-truth about being stalked. She didn't press me for details. She just gave me a blanket and let me sleep on her couch. The email stopped after that. I stopped seeing the SUV. No more knocks, no more blank messages. But I still think about that man. I think about what he said and how calm he was, how certain. I didn't accept the job, but that didn't matter because someone else did. I didn't think anything of the package at first. Just a padded envelope, no markings, no return address. But when I flipped it over and saw the tape, identical to the one from before, I froze. I knew what it was before I opened it, before I even picked it up. I knew exactly what it was. This whole thing started with Sam. He wasn't a drug addict or anything like that. He just liked weird stuff. Always had. If there was a limited edition or rare strain or some niche subreddit whispering about a plant you couldn't get on the regular market, he'd find it. That was kind of his thing. We'd met working the back shift at a call center. Just 2 guys taking breaks in the same smoke shelter every night. Over time, we started hanging out more. Shared music, talked about travel plans we'd never take. Compared notes on which crypto wallets didn't suck. One night, he brought up the dark web. Not in a braggy way, just casually, like someone mentioning they'd bought a rare vinyl. He said he'd been browsing some lesser-known forums, looking for these exotic cannabis hybrids, stuff grown in places that didn't export, rare phenotypes with strange colors or effects. Some of it sounded made up. Blue leaves, flower that smelled like rust. One supposedly gave you lucid dreams for 2 nights straight. I didn't think he'd actually buy anything. I mean, we've all clicked too far down a rabbit hole at 2 a.m. But that's different from actually putting in your address and waiting for a stranger to mail you drugs. But he did. I was there, actually, at his place. We'd just ordered Chinese. He had his laptop open and was clicking through a market page. One I hadn't seen before. Everything about it looked off. The fonts were weird. The prices weren't in dollars or euros. And the descriptions were long, poetic, almost cryptic. It didn't read like a vendor trying to sell a product. It felt more like someone offering an experience. He bought one labeled The Hollow Root. I remember that name because it didn't sound like weed. It sounded like something you'd find in a cursed field or buried in a temple wall. But he bought it anyway. Transferred some Monero. Got the confirmation. Closed the laptop. I laughed it off. Told him it probably wouldn't arrive. Or if it did, it'd just be crushed oregano. But 5 days later, it showed up. That's when things changed. The envelope was thick, heavier than it should have been, wrapped in brown paper, taped with this strange patterned adhesive I'd never seen before. Gold markings over a red base, like something from a foreign postal system. Inside was a vacuum-sealed pouch and a smaller envelope, handwritten in a language neither of us recognized. It wasn't English, it wasn't French or Spanish, or anything European. The characters looked angular, stylized, Middle Eastern maybe, Arabic, I don't know. We looked it up online and couldn't find a match. The weed, if that's what it even was pitch black, like charcoal. It didn't even have the usual skunky smell. It was chemical, sharp, something between acetone and burnt leaves. I told him not to smoke it. I didn't like any part of this. He joked about it, but even he didn't seem entirely relaxed. That was the first time I saw hesitation in him, and he didn't hesitate often. He ended up trying it later that night after I left, sent me a message saying it gave him the most vivid dreams he'd ever had, said he saw people, places, sounds he didn't recognize, but that they felt real. After that, he changed. He kept his curtains shut during the day, barely answered his phone. He said he felt like he was being watched, that cars were slowing down near his building, that he'd seen the same man 3 days in a row, walking past his flat, wearing mirrored sunglasses even when it rained. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe the stuff he smoked messed with his head. But then I saw it too. Not the exact same guy, but a pattern. Middle-aged men, clean-cut, hanging around places that didn't make sense. In car parks, outside supermarkets. One of them stood across the street from my place for almost an hour. Didn't move, just leaned on a street pole like he belonged there. Then Sam disappeared. He didn't show up to work. His phone went straight to voicemail. I went to his flat, but no one answered. I called his parents. They hadn't heard from him either. 2 days later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was an address. I didn't go. I couldn't. But someone did, because the police found him later that week, barefoot, covered in bruises, barely speaking. He wouldn't tell anyone where he'd been. It took a few days, but eventually he opened up. Said he'd been grabbed off the street, blindfolded, driven somewhere. He heard accents, Middle Eastern maybe. He said they didn't hurt him at first, just asked questions about what he knew, who gave him access, whether he believed in sacrifice for a greater cause. They wanted him to join something, help spread something. He didn't get the full picture, but it was bad, like terror cell bad. They let him go eventually, or maybe he escaped. That part never came out clearly. He said he ran through the woods until he hit a road, flagged down a trucker who didn't speak English. After that, he wasn't the same. He moved back in with his parents, stopped going online, barely spoke to anyone. I went to see him once, just once. He looked thinner, eyes sunken. He didn't smile, just kept his blinds shut, and the door chain-latched. He said he didn't feel safe, that he thought they were still watching him. 3 weeks later, he was gone. He left a note. I never read it. His parents did, but they wouldn't show anyone. They said it was better that way. That was 6 months ago. And now, standing in my hallway, holding this envelope in my hand, the same pattern tape, the same weight, the same faint chemical smell. I can't pretend it's over, because it just started again. Dark Voyeurs. I never wanted to share this story. Even now, as I type this out at 3 a.m. with my blinds drawn tight, I keep second-guessing myself. But after what happened last week, after seeing that familiar username pop up in my email, I realized I need to put this somewhere. Maybe as a warning. Maybe just to convince myself I'm not going mad. I've always been the tech guy in my friend group. The one people call when their laptop's acting up or when they need help setting up their new smart TV. It started back when I was 13, taking apart my dad's old computers in our garage in Manchester. My parents thought it was just a phase, but computers made sense to me in a way people never did. I was that quiet kid who'd rather debug code than go to parties. Not exactly the most exciting childhood. but it led me down some interesting paths. University was when things really took off. I studied computer science at Leeds, and while everyone else was out getting plastered at the student union, I'd be in my room exploring the furthest corners of the internet. It wasn't just about the coding challenges or the hacking forums, though those were fascinating enough. I was curious about what else was out there, beyond the surface web most people never venture past. That curiosity is what led me to the dark web in my second year. Looking back, I wish I could go back and slap some sense into my younger self. I thought I was being so clever, so edgy, setting up Tor, finding those first .onion links, feeling like I was some kind of digital explorer. It's embarrassing now, how proud I was of myself, like I'd discovered some secret club. I wasn't doing anything particularly dodgy at first, just browsing, looking at some marketplaces out of curiosity, reading forums where people discuss privacy and security. I remember telling myself that I was just there for academic reasons, to understand the full landscape of the internet. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? That we're just observers, not participants, that we can look without being touched by what we see. I'd been exploring for about 6 months when I came across a link on one of the forums. Someone had posted it with a cryptic message, for those with stronger stomachs than mine. No other context, no explanation. I should have left it alone. I knew even then that there were corners of the dark web no one should visit, but there was something about the way it was phrased, like a challenge. And I'd always had trouble walking away from a challenge. It was a Tuesday night in November. I remember because my flatmates had gone to see some horror film at the cinema. Ironic, considering what I was about to witness was far worse than any fictional horror. They'd invited me along, but I'd claimed I had coursework to finish. In reality, I just wanted a few hours alone to explore without anyone looking over my shoulder. My room was small, with just enough space for a bed and a desk crammed under the window. The streetlight outside cast an orange glow through the cheap blinds, making patterns on my keyboard as I clicked the link and waited for the page to load. Tor is notoriously slow, and I remember drumming my fingers, wondering if the link was dead. Maybe part of me was hoping it wouldn't load at all. When it finally did, it looked underwhelming at first. A black background, a simple login page with no graphics or explanations. Just a username and password field, and below it, a button that said Observe. No option to register that I could see. I was about to close it when I noticed a small line of text at the bottom. Guests welcome for preview only. I hesitated. Every instinct was telling me to close the browser and forget I'd ever seen this page. But that damn curiosity, it's like an itch you can't help scratching, even when you know it'll make things worse. I moved my cursor to the Observe button and clicked. The screen went black for a moment, then loaded what looked like a streaming video. The quality was poor, grainy, and with a slight delay, like CCTV footage. It showed a room, empty, except for a metal table in the center. The walls were concrete, and there was a drain in the floor. My first thought was that it was some kind of industrial space, maybe an abandoned building. Then I noticed the tools arranged neatly on a tray beside the table. Scalpels, pliers, things I couldn't even identify. My stomach dropped. I knew I should close the browser immediately, but I was frozen, hoping this was just some elaborate setup for a prank or a very convincing piece of performance art. That's when I noticed the chat window on the right side of the screen, messages scrolling by too quickly to read properly. Anonymous users I didn't recognize, typing in a mix of languages. I caught fragments in English asking when it would start, commenting on previous sessions, preparing requests for what would happen next. It reminded me of those live gaming streams my flatmate would watch, except there was something soulless and predatory about the way these messages moved, like digital vultures circling. I felt sick. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of hoax, a shocking display put on to scare people or to scam them out of money. I remember adjusting my position in my chair. The cheap foam cushion had gone flat after too many all-night coding sessions. My neck was stiff. I always got tense when I was anxious, a habit since childhood that my mum used to point out. But then a door opened on screen and two figures entered the room. One was wearing a plain white mask that covered their entire face, dressed in what looked like surgical scrubs. The other, God, I still see them in my nightmares, was a young man, maybe in his 20s, with tape over his mouth and his hands bound behind his back. His eyes were wild with terror as he was forced onto the table. I should have closed the browser then. I should have reported it to someone, though I had no idea who would have jurisdiction over something like this. Instead, I sat there, telling myself it couldn't be real, even as the chat window exploded with activity. Users were placing what looked like bids, specifying what they wanted to see done. The messages contained horrific requests, starting with extremities, avoiding facial damage initially, grotesque suggestions about the victim's eyes. My throat went dry as I read them. I remember my hand hovering over the trackpad, trembling slightly. The heating in my room had kicked on, that familiar clicking sound as the radiator warmed up, such a normal, everyday sound that felt completely at odds with the horror unfolding on my screen. I felt like I was going to be sick. This couldn't be happening. Not in real life, not with me watching. I told myself it was an elaborate fake, that the person on the table was an actor, that the blood that began to flow when the masked figure made the first cut wasn't real. But deep down, I knew. The screams that came through my headphones weren't acted. The terror in that young man's eyes wasn't performed. I finally snapped out of my horrified trance and slammed my laptop shut. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. When I came back, shaking, I opened my computer again, not to watch, but to figure out how to report what I'd seen. But the page was gone, redirecting to an error message. I tried the link again, but it was dead. For days afterwards, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room, that table, those tools. I told myself there was nothing I could have done. I had no way of knowing where it was happening, no way to identify the people involved. I tried to convince myself it might have been fake after all. People can do amazing things with special effects these days, right? But I knew the truth. I'd seen something real, something horrific, and I'd done nothing but watch. I nearly dropped out of university. I stopped going to lectures, stopped talking to friends. My flatmates thought I was having some kind of breakdown, which I suppose I was. I formatted my hard drive and reinstalled everything, paranoid that somehow I'd been tracked, that whoever ran that site knew who I was and what I'd seen. After a few months, I started to recover. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, that I'd never go near the dark web again. I focused on finishing my degree, got a job at a cybersecurity firm in London, built a normal life. I almost managed to convince myself that night had been some kind of fever dream, until last week. I was working late, alone in my flat. These days, I keep normal hours, have a girlfriend, go to the pub with colleagues, all the things normal people do. But sometimes I still stay up too late, coding or gaming or just browsing Reddit. It was around 1 a.m. when the email arrived. It came to my personal account. Not the one I use for work. The subject line was just a string of numbers. The sender's address was a jumble of letters and digits that didn't look like any standard email format. I should have deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. There was no message, just a link, and below it, a single line stating they'd missed me, followed by an observer number I'd never seen before. I'd never used that identifier anywhere. It wasn't something I'd created or chosen, but as soon as I saw it, I knew. It was what they'd called me on that site. It was the automatic observer ID assigned to me when I'd clicked that button. I remember the room suddenly feeling colder, like someone had left a window open in December. My ears started to ring slightly, that same feeling I'd get before a panic attack during my university finals. I should have called someone, maybe my friend David, who works in digital security, but something kept me frozen in place. They knew who I was. They'd known all along. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely move the mouse, but I managed to delete the email. I shut down my computer, unplugged it from the wall. Childish, perhaps, but it was all I could think to do. I spent the rest of the night pacing my flat, jumping at every sound, checking the locks on my door and windows over and over. The next day, another email arrived, this time on my work account. Same subject line, same sender. I deleted it without opening it, then spent the day looking over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. I kept checking my reflection in my monitor screen, half expecting to see someone standing behind me. The office felt different somehow. Spaces I'd walked through 1,000 times suddenly seemed threatening, filled with shadows and blind corners. The walk to the bathroom felt like crossing a minefield. When I got home, there was a third email waiting. On an old university account I hardly ever check anymore. This one had a message telling me it was my last chance, mentioning they had something special planned just for me. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after that. I called in sick, turned off my phone, disconnected my router. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was probably just some sick joke, someone who'd hacked my accounts. But then the letter arrived, an actual physical letter delivered to my flat. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with an address printed on it, an address less than a mile from where I live, and a time, tonight, 11 p.m. I've spent the day trying to figure out what to do. Go to the police and tell them what exactly? That years ago I watched something terrible on the dark web, and now I'm getting creepy emails. I have no proof, no evidence of any crime. Just my word, and the terrible feeling that somehow I've been marked. The rational part of my brain says to ignore it, to stay home, lock the doors, maybe go stay with a friend for a few days, until this blows over. But there's another part, the part that couldn't resist clicking that link all those years ago, that wonders. What if there's another victim? What if by going, I could somehow stop what happened before from happening again? Or what if it's a trap? What if I'm meant to be the next person on that table? It's 10:30 p.m. now. I have 30 minutes to decide. I keep telling myself I won't go, that only a madman would walk knowingly into what could be his own murder. But I also know that if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for them to find me again. I've written this all down as a record, I suppose. If something happens to me, maybe someone will find it. Maybe they'll understand. Or maybe I'm just scaring myself over nothing. And tomorrow I'll read this back and laugh at how paranoid I've become. It's funny how the mind works. Last night I was worried about paying my council tax on time. And now here I am writing what might be my last words. The ordinary and the horrific side by side. I just remembered I was supposed to call my mum tomorrow for her birthday. I should have visited more often. There's a knock at my door. It's too early. It's only 10:33. No one should be here. I'm not expecting anyone. The knocking is getting louder, more insistent. I can hear voices outside, whispering. The letterbox just flapped open. Something's been pushed through, a white envelope, just like the one that came this morning. I don't want to open it. I don't want to know what's inside. But I also know I don't have a choice anymore. They found me. And judging by what I can see through my peephole, 3 figures in white masks waiting patiently. They're not planning to leave until they get what they came for. I'm going to stop writing now. I need to think about what to do next. If anyone reads this, well, I'm not sure what I expect you to do. Just know that there are corners of the internet where real nightmares live. And sometimes, when you look into the darkness looks back and remembers your face. I haven't been able to look at medical scrub since it happened. That specific shade of blue-green sends me into a cold sweat every time I spot it in a hospital corridor or even on a TV show. The sound of rubber gloves snapping against wrists makes me physically ill. 3 years later, and my body still remembers everything my mind desperately tries to forget about wellness solutions. I was in my final year of nursing school when money got tight, like eating nothing but ramen for weeks tight. My student loans barely covered tuition, and London rent was bleeding me dry. I'd been picking up odd healthcare jobs through this app that connected medical students with private clinics needing temporary staff. Most gigs were straightforward, covering for staff on holiday, helping with administrative backlogs, that sort of thing. The pay was decent, the hours flexible around my classes. That's how I found the listing for wellness solutions. They needed someone for weekend overnight shifts, primarily monitoring post-operative patients and maintaining basic records. The pay was nearly triple what other clinics offered, a detail that should have raised red flags immediately. But when you're staring at an eviction notice and surviving on tea and toast, rational thinking takes a backseat to desperation. The clinic was located in one of those converted industrial buildings in East London, the kind that developers renovate into luxury spaces while keeping exposed brick and ductwork to seem trendy. From the outside, it looked professional enough. Clean signage, security cameras, proper access control. The reception area was minimalist but well appointed, with those uncomfortable designer chairs and abstract art that seems mandatory in private healthcare facilities. I remember my first impression being that everything seemed slightly off, but in ways I couldn't immediately identify. The medical equipment was top tier, higher quality than the teaching hospital where I trained. The monitoring systems were cutting edge, yet there was an emptiness to the place, an absence of the normal indicators of a functioning medical practice. No health education posters, no magazines in the waiting area, no photos of the medical team or credentials displayed, just sterile walls and an unnatural silence. The clinic director, Dr. Reynolds, though I later discovered that wasn't his real name, gave me a brief tour that first evening. He explained that Wellness Solutions specialized in aesthetic procedures for discerning international clients who value privacy. The explanation made enough sense. Plenty of wealthy people fly in for cosmetic surgery they don't want their social circles knowing about. He showed me the recovery rooms where patients would be sleeping, the monitoring station where I'd be based, and the basic charting system I'd use to record vital signs and medication administration. What struck me as unusual was how he explicitly instructed me never to enter the 3 operating theaters at the back of the clinic. He emphasized that they contained sensitive equipment calibrated for specific procedures, and that cleaning staff would handle those areas separately. At the time, I rationalized this as reasonable. I was hired for post-op care, not surgical assistance. My first few weekends passed uneventfully. Patients would already be in recovery when I arrived for my shift, sedated and bandaged. I'd check vital signs, administer prescribed medications, and document everything as required. Most patients were gone by morning, transferred to private recovery facilities, or, as I was told, luxury hotels where nurses would continue their care. I never saw the same patient twice. What began to unsettle me were the inconsistencies I noticed between the procedures listed in the charts and the actual conditions of the patients. A chart might indicate a routine rhinoplasty, but the patient would be heavily sedated with pain management more appropriate for major surgery. Someone listed as having undergone liposuction would have bandaging in areas that made no anatomical sense for fat removal. The medication protocols were often extreme. Immunosuppressants for cosmetic procedures, powerful antibiotics typically reserved for high-risk infections. Even more disturbing were the patient demographics. Despite the clinic supposedly catering to wealthy clients, many appeared malnourished or showed signs of long-term health neglect. Some had older surgical scars that looked nothing like professional medical work. Few had proper preoperative assessment documentation. When I cautiously questioned Dr. Reynolds about these discrepancies, he dismissed my concerns with vague references to international medical standards and reminded me that discretion was part of what I was being paid for. The turning point came about 2 months into my employment. I'd arrived for my usual shift to find the clinic unusually active for a Friday evening. Typically, surgeries were completed and patients settled before I arrived at 11 p.m. But that night, there were staff I'd never seen before, moving equipment and speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Reynolds informed me that they were preparing for a special case and that I should focus on the recovery rooms at the front of the clinic. Around midnight, curiosity got the better of me. The unusual activity had died down, and the clinic had returned to its characteristic silence. I decided to check the supply room near the restricted operating theatres, telling myself I needed to restock my cart, though in truth, I wanted to glimpse whatever special case had caused such disruption to the normal routine. As I approached the back hallway, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small room adjacent to Operating Theatre 1, its door slightly ajar. Inside was what appeared to be a sophisticated control room, with multiple monitors, broadcasting equipment, and what looked like payment processing terminals. One screen displayed what was unmistakably the interior of the operating theatre next door, currently empty but fully prepped for a procedure. Another monitor showed what appeared to be a chat room or forum, with usernames I didn't recognize and messages in multiple languages. A third displayed a countdown timer, 00:37:14. Beside it was a cryptocurrency transaction log, amounts updating in real time next to usernames. The realization hit me with physical force. This wasn't just a private clinic performing discreet cosmetic surgery. This was a broadcasting studio, streaming live surgical procedures to paying viewers on the dark web. The international clients weren't the patients, they were the audience. As this horrific understanding washed over me, I heard footsteps approaching. I slipped into a nearby linen closet, heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would give me away. Through the slats in the door, I watched as Dr. Reynolds and 2 men in surgical attire wheeled a gurney toward Operating Theatre 1. The person on the gurney was conscious, but clearly terrified, attempting to move despite being partially restrained, making muffled sounds of distress through what appeared to be a medical-grade mouth covering. What happened next shifted my understanding of horror permanently. Dr. Reynolds paused by the control room, checking the monitors while explaining something to his companions. I caught fragments about viewer requests and premium packages and interactive options. One of the men adjusted a small earpiece and nodded toward the countdown timer, which now read 002943. They continued into the operating theatre, but not before I glimpsed the surgical tools laid out on trays beside the operating table. These weren't standard surgical instruments for any legitimate procedure I'd studied. Some I recognized from my training as being historically used in amputations or rarely performed surgeries. Others appeared modified, designed for purposes I couldn't and didn't want to imagine. I remained frozen in that linen closet, terrified of discovery, yet unable to leave without potentially being seen. Through the closet slats, I could see into the control room, where one of the monitors now showed the interior of Operating Theatre 1. The patient was being prepped, cameras adjusted for optimal viewing angles. Text appeared at the bottom of the screen, which I realized with growing nausea were viewer comments and requests being transmitted to the surgical team's earpieces. When the actual procedure began, I had to physically press my hand against my mouth to prevent any sound from escaping. What I witnessed wasn't surgery in any medical sense. It was methodical mutilation performed with clinical precision, broadcast to an audience that was actively directing aspects of the process through their payments and requests. The surgical team worked with the detached efficiency of people performing a job they'd done many times before, pausing occasionally as if receiving new instructions through their earpieces. I don't know how long I remained in that closet, unable to look away from the monitor yet desperate to unsee everything. Eventually, my survival instinct overrode my paralysis. I needed to escape, to report what I'd discovered. But to whom? The level of sophistication I'd witnessed suggested resources and connections beyond ordinary criminal operations. If this clinic had existed for any length of time, they likely had contingencies for exactly the situation I was in. My opportunity came when an alarm from one of the recovery rooms drew the attention of the staff member monitoring the control room. As he left to investigate, I slipped out of the closet and made my way toward the emergency exit, abandoning my belongings at the monitoring station where I should have been working. Just as I reached the exit, a hand gripped my arm. One of the surgical assistants I'd glimpsed earlier stood there, surgical mask pulled down to reveal a face that showed no surprise at finding me there. His expression wasn't angry or threatening. It was evaluating, calculating, as if I were a mathematical problem requiring solution. He explained in a conversational tone that I had witnessed their premium service, where select clients paid exceptional sums for customized procedures on volunteer subjects. He assured me the participants were compensated appropriately for their contribution to medical research and viewer education. When I expressed obvious disbelief, he offered to show me their consent documentation and payment structures, as if this would somehow normalize what I'd seen. As he spoke, maintaining his grip on my arm, I realized with growing horror that he wasn't trying to frighten or threaten me. He was recruiting me. He described how my nursing background made me an ideal addition to their team, how the compensation would dwarf anything legitimate healthcare could offer, how my student debt could be eliminated within months. His tone was that of a corporate headhunter offering a prestigious position, not a criminal proposing I join an enterprise broadcasting torture for profit. What terrified me most wasn't the gruesome surgery I'd witnessed, or even the immediate danger I was in. It was the momentary temptation I felt when he mentioned the money. For one fraction of a second, financial desperation made me consider what he was offering, and that brief weakness haunts me more than anything else about that night. I stammered something about needing time to think, trying to appear open to persuasion rather than horrified. He seemed satisfied with this, releasing my arm, but informing me that leaving immediately would appear suspicious to the others. He suggested I return to my monitoring station and complete my shift as normal. We could discuss terms tomorrow. After all, he pointed out, I was already involved simply by working there. I nodded, walking steadily back to my station while my mind raced through escape scenarios. Once there, I pretended to continue my work while surreptitiously gathering only what I absolutely needed: my phone, keys, and ID. I waited until I heard the operating theatre doors open, signaling the procedure had concluded. In the momentary commotion of post-operative activity, I slipped out through a side entrance used for supply deliveries. I ran without direction at first, simply needing to put distance between myself and that building. Eventually, I found myself at a 24-hour cafe where I tried to organize my thoughts and consider my options. Going to the police seemed obvious, but what evidence did I have beyond my testimony? I'd taken nothing from the clinic, no recordings, no patient information, nothing that could corroborate my account. And if this operation had the resources I suspected, how confident could I be that local law enforcement wasn't already compromised? In the end, I submitted an anonymous tip to both the Metropolitan Police and a medical regulatory body, providing the clinic's address and a brief description of what I'd witnessed. Then I withdrew from nursing school, emptied my meager bank account, and fled to my cousin's home in Edinburgh, where I remained for months, jumping at shadows and checking over my shoulder constantly. I learned later through news reports that Wellness Solutions had been permanently closed due to zoning violations. Less than a week after my escape, there was no mention of arrests, no investigation reported in the media. The building was quickly renovated and reopened as luxury apartments within months. When I finally worked up the courage to look into Dr. Reynolds, I discovered no medical professional by that name existed in any UK registry. 3 years later, I've rebuilt some semblance of a normal life. I completed my nursing degree at a different university and now work in pediatrics in a small community hospital, about as far from private aesthetic clinics as possible. I've moved multiple times, changed my phone number, deleted all social media. Normal precautions, I tell myself, though part of me knows they're probably unnecessary. If they wanted to find me, they likely could have by now. Sometimes I wonder if Wellness Solutions was unique or just one node in a larger network. How many other abandoned buildings or legitimate-seeming medical facilities house similar operations? How many other desperate students or healthcare workers have been drawn into that world, either knowingly or, like me, discovering the truth too late? I still receive emails occasionally from temporary healthcare staffing apps, listing private clinics seeking weekend help. Some offer remarkably generous compensation for simple overnight monitoring. I delete them immediately, but before I do, I sometimes find myself looking at the addresses, wondering how many other viewing rooms exist behind unremarkable facades, how many other special cases are broadcast to audiences willing to pay premium rates for custom modifications to unwilling bodies. The most disturbing thought, the one that keeps me awake some nights, is wondering about those viewers, thousands of them, based on the counter I saw that night. People sitting at ordinary computers in ordinary homes, watching the unthinkable while perhaps sipping coffee or eating dinner. People who might be my neighbors, my colleagues, my patients' parents. People who look completely normal, but who feed a marketplace that transforms human suffering into entertainment at the right price. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if somewhere out there, someone is watching me through their screen, waiting for a performance they've already paid to enjoy.